Growing up, I always knew I was second best in my parents' eyes. My name is Jodi, and for as long as I can remember, my brother Tommy has been the golden child of our family. He's 2 years younger than me, but somehow that never stopped my parents from making it clear who their favorite was. When I was 8 and Tommy was 6, I remember bringing home a report card with mostly B's and 1 A. My mom glanced at it and said, "That's nice, Jodi," before putting it on the fridge with a single magnet. When Tommy brought home his report card a week later with all A's, my parents acted like he'd discovered the cure for cancer. They took him out for ice cream and bought him a new video game. "Tommy has such potential," my dad would say, ruffling his hair, "he's going places." I tried not to let it bother me. I wasn't a straight-A student like Tommy, but I worked hard. My teachers always said I was one of the most diligent students in class. I read books constantly, fantasy novels, biographies, science books, anything I could get my hands on. I taught myself how to find information in encyclopedias and later on the internet. But somehow, that never impressed my parents. "Books won't get you anywhere if you can't get the grades to match," my mom would say whenever she caught me reading instead of studying. The worst was when Tommy finished 5th grade with straight A's. My parents announced at dinner one night that they were taking him to Disneyland as a reward. "What about Jodi?" Tommy asked, looking at me across the table. My dad cleared his throat. "Jodi will be staying with Grandma Rose, she hasn't earned it with her grades." I stared at my plate, pushing around my peas. I was 13 then, old enough to understand what they were really saying. I wasn't good enough. Grandma Rose was my mom's mother, and thankfully, she was nothing like her daughter. She lived in a cozy house about 20 minutes from ours, with a garden full of roses and a kitchen that always smelled like cookies. While my parents took Tommy to Disneyland, I spent the week with her. "You know, Jodi," she said one night as we sat on her porch swing, "your parents don't understand what they're doing. Children should be loved equally, each child is different, with different talents and strengths. Your parents, they think they're doing right by Tommy, but they're hurting both of you in the process." My relationship with Tommy was complicated. We weren't close, but he never treated me badly either. He was the only one in the family who treated me like a normal person. Sometimes I caught him looking at me with what seemed like guilt when our parents praised him and ignored me, but he never said anything about it. When I turned 16, I got a job at a local coffee shop called Bean There. I wanted my own money, a way to be less dependent on my parents. After school, I'd work my shift, make some tips, and then head to Grandma Rose's house. She hadn't been feeling well lately, her arthritis was getting worse, and she sometimes seemed confused about what day it was. Every visit, I'd bring her fresh pastries from the coffee shop. We'd sit at her kitchen table, drinking tea and eating chocolate croissants or blueberry muffins, and she'd tell me stories about her younger days. "Your grandfather was quite the dancer," she'd say, eyes twinkling, "swept me right off my feet at the county fair in '62. Those afternoons with Grandma Rose were the brightest parts of my weeks. With her, I didn't feel like a disappointment or a failure. I was just Jodi, and that was enough. But everything changed when I turned 17. Grandma Rose, who'd been getting more frail by the month, passed away in her sleep. I was devastated. She'd been my rock, my safe harbor in the storm of my family life. The funeral was small, just family and a few of Grandma's friends from her church. My parents stood stiff and formal, my mom dabbing occasionally at her dry eyes with a tissue. Tommy stood beside me and actually put his hand on my shoulder when I started crying during the eulogy. A week after the funeral, we all gathered in a lawyer's office for the reading of Grandma Rose's will. I wasn't expecting anything, I'd never thought about Grandma's money or possessions. I just missed her. The lawyer, a balding man with round glasses, cleared his throat and began reading, "To my daughter, Margaret Williams, I leave my house and all its contents." My mom nodded, like she'd been expecting this. "To my grandchildren, Jodi and Thomas Williams, I leave my savings, to be divided equally between them, $100,000 each, to be placed in separate accounts which they may access upon turning 18 years of age." My mouth fell open, I couldn't believe it. $100,000? That was more money than I could imagine. And Grandma had left it to me and Tommy, equally. I glanced at my parents. My dad's face was red, and my mom's lips were pressed into a thin line. They didn't look happy, they looked angry. The next morning at breakfast, the storm broke. "So, Jodi," my mom said, her voice falsely sweet, "what are you planning to do with that money from your grandmother?" I looked up from my cereal. I thought I'd use it for college tuition. My dad snorted. Tommy kept his eyes on his plate. "College?" My mom laughed. "Honey, let's be realistic. You can keep working at that coffee shop, it suits you." I stared at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "What your mother means," my dad cut in, "is that Tommy is the one who needs that money for college. He dreams of Princeton, you know, that's a prestigious school, much more expensive than any place you'd get into." "But Grandma left the money to both of us," I said. "Yes, but Tommy needs it more," my mom insisted. "He's got real potential, you should give your share to him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "No," I said, my voice shaking, "that's my money, Grandma wanted me to have it." "Selfish," my mother spat, her face flushed with anger, "after everything we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. "You've always favored Tommy. You took him to Disneyland and left me behind. You've never once celebrated my achievements." "Don't be so dramatic," my dad said, dismissing me with a wave. "Tommy deserves the opportunities, he has a future." "And I don't?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "I work hard at school, I have a job, I take care of myself." "That's enough," my mother snapped, "you're being ungrateful and selfish. Tommy needs that money more than you do." I looked at Tommy, who was staring at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. "It's not your fault," I told him, "but I'm not giving up my inheritance." I walked out of the kitchen, my heart pounding. For the next few days, my parents gave me the silent treatment. They'd walk past me in the hallway without a word, talk around me at dinner as if I wasn't there. Tommy would shoot me apologetic glances, but he never stood up for me. A week after our argument, I came home early from my shift at the coffee shop. As I approached my parents' bedroom, I heard their hushed voices. I paused, not intending to eavesdrop, but then I heard my name. "That damn lawyer said there's nothing we can do," my father was saying. "The money is Jodi's, and only she can access it when she turns 18. "There must be some way," my mother insisted. "We can't let that money go to waste on her, Tommy needs it for Princeton." I know, but legally, our hands are tied." I backed away, my heart racing. They'd actually consulted a lawyer to try to take my inheritance? The realization hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just favoring Tommy, they were actively trying to sabotage me. From that moment on, I started counting the days until my 18th birthday and graduation. I worked extra shifts at the coffee shop, saving every penny. I applied to colleges, focusing on those with good financial programs. I didn't tell my parents about any of it. When graduation day finally arrived, I felt nothing but relief. The ceremony was held in our high school gym, decorated with blue and gold streamers. As I sat among my classmates in my cap and gown, I scanned the audience for my family. My parents' seats were empty. After the ceremony, as everyone was hugging their families and taking photos, I stood alone, clutching my diploma. Then I felt a tap on my shoulder. "Congrats, sis," Tommy said, giving me an awkward smile. "Tommy, what are you doing here? Where are Mom and Dad?" He shrugged. "At home, they didn't want to come, so I sneaked out, they don't know I'm here." I was surprised by the gesture. "Thanks for coming." "Yeah, well," he shuffled his feet, "you deserve to have someone here. And I'm sorry about everything, you know, with the money and stuff." I nodded, not sure what to say. It wasn't his fault, but he'd never really stood up for me either. The next day, my parents dropped their final bombshell. "You're 18 now," my mother said at dinner, her voice cold. "You have access to your money, so you need to move out." I looked at her, then at my father, who was nodding in agreement. Tommy was staring at his plate again. When? I asked, my voice steady. As soon as possible, my father said. Tomorrow would be best. I had expected this, but it still hurt. I nodded silently, got up from the table, and went to my room to pack. I didn't cry. I was done crying over people who couldn't love me. The next day, I used some of my inheritance to rent a small apartment. I packed my belongings into my beat-up car and left without saying goodbye. Tommy texted me later that day, "I'm sorry, they're wrong, let me know if you need anything." I didn't reply, I was too numb. Over the summer, I researched colleges and decided on State University, which had an excellent financial management program and was located in the neighboring state. It wasn't Princeton, but it was a solid school, and they'd accepted me with a partial scholarship. In August, I moved into the dorms, paid my tuition with my inheritance money, and still had a decent amount left over. My roommate, Alicia, was from California and seemed to spend money like it was water: new clothes, fancy dinners, concert tickets. But Grandma Rose had taught me the value of saving, so I was careful with my funds. I didn't talk to my parents at all, but Tommy would call occasionally. He'd tell me about high school, his friends, normal brother-sister stuff. He never mentioned our parents much, and I never asked. 2 years later, Tommy graduated from high school. He called me with news. "Mom and Dad sold Grandma's house," he said, his voice flat. "They're using the money to pay for Princeton." "Oh," I said, not sure how to respond. Grandma's cozy house with the rose garden, sold to fund Tommy's education. It hurt, but I'd expected nothing less from my parents. After that call, Tommy stopped calling regularly. When I tried to reach out to him, he'd answer briefly, saying he was too busy with college. Eventually, I stopped trying. I threw myself into my studies, determined to prove my parents wrong. I graduated with honors in financial management, and through a connection from an internship, I landed a job at Harper Financial in the same city as my college. It wasn't a big-name firm, but it was a start. My first apartment was tiny, with barely enough room for a bed and a desk, but it was mine. I started at the bottom, working on the simplest accounts, but I was good at what I did. I had an eye for detail and a knack for finding innovative solutions to financial problems. Within 3 years, I'd been promoted twice. By 27, I was heading my own team. At 29, I was one of the youngest senior financial managers in the company, with a salary that allowed me to finally buy the apartment I'd been dreaming of, a modern 2-bedroom with large windows and a view of the city park. Then one day, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Hello?" I answered, expecting a sales call. "Jodi," the voice was deeper than I remembered, but I knew immediately who it was. "Tommy?" "Yeah, it's me," Tommy said. "I'm actually in your city right now. There's a cafe on Main Street called the Blue Door. We could meet there at 7? "I know the place, I'll be there." The Blue Door was a trendy cafe with exposed brick walls and hanging plants. I arrived early and chose a table near the back. At 7, the door opened, and a man walked in who I almost didn't recognize. Tommy had always been the handsome one in the family, tall and athletic with our dad's strong jawline and our mom's bright blue eyes. The man who walked into the cafe was still tall, but gaunt. His clothes hung loosely on his frame, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "You look different," I said bluntly. He gave a humorless laugh. "Yeah, I've been through some stuff." After we ordered our drinks, Tommy got straight to the point. "I messed up, Jodi," he said quietly. "When I got to Princeton, I went crazy with freedom. Mom and Dad had always been so strict. At college, I could finally do whatever I wanted. Drinking, drugs, the whole scene. By junior year, they kicked me out for drugs." I stared at him, shocked. This wasn't the future our parents had imagined for their golden boy. "Mom and Dad were devastated," Tommy continued. "I spent 3 years in rehab. I've been sober for 2 years now." "I'm sorry you went through that," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want Tommy to suffer. "I can't find a decent job. I've been working at a gas station back home, but the pay is terrible. I came here hoping for a fresh start." I studied him. "What kind of job are you looking for?" Anything decent, I'm not picky. My friend Lena worked in HR at a shipping company and had mentioned they were hiring. I might be able to help, I said. I have a friend at Preston Shipping. They're hiring administrative staff. I can put in a word for you. Tommy's face lit up. Really? That would be amazing, Jodi. The next morning, I called Lena. She arranged an interview for Tommy, and by the end of the week, he had the job. It wasn't glamorous, mostly filing paperwork and data entry, but it was a start. Over the next few months, Tommy and I reconnected. We'd meet for coffee or dinner once a week. He seemed committed to staying clean and rebuilding his life. During one of our dinners, Tommy mentioned our parents. I tried to tell them about you, he said, pushing pasta around his plate, about how well you're doing with your career and everything. What did they say? I asked, trying to sound indifferent. Tommy looked uncomfortable. They cut me off before I could even get started. Dad said he wasn't interested in hearing about you, and Mom just changed the subject. They have no idea how successful you've become. 6 months after Tommy started his new job, he came to me with a problem. Mom and Dad are in financial trouble, he said as we sat in a cafe. They've got medical bills, credit card debt, and they're behind on the mortgage. They might lose the house. I felt a twist of vindictive pleasure, followed immediately by guilt. That's unfortunate, I said neutrally. I was thinking, Tommy said hesitantly, maybe you could help them out? Just until they get back on their feet? I was about to refuse, but something stopped me. The memory of Grandma Rose's voice, children should be loved equally. She would have wanted me to help, despite everything. How much do they need? I asked. $2,000 a month would cover the mortgage and help with the other bills. It was a significant amount, but I could afford it. Fine, I said, I'll help. Do you want me to tell them it's from you? Tommy asked tentatively. I shrugged, it doesn't matter, you can just forward it to them from your account, I'm just fulfilling my filial duty. I didn't really care if they knew or not, this wasn't about recognition or reconciliation. It was simply the right thing to do. And so began our arrangement. Every month, I transferred $2,000 to Tommy's account, and he forwarded it to our parents. Whether they thought it was from him or some other source, I didn't ask and didn't care. For 2 years, this arrangement continued. I focused on my career, Tommy kept his job and his sobriety, and our parents stayed in their house. One evening, Tommy called me sounding excited. Mom and Dad are celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary next month, he said. They're having a big party at the Grand Hotel. All the family will be there, plus their friends, and Jodi, they want you to come. I nearly dropped my phone. What? Why would they invite me? I think they want to reconcile, Tommy said, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. Will you come? Please? I'll be there, and it might be good to finally clear the air. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment, thinking about my parents. They still had no idea about my success. They'd never reached out, never apologized. Why would they suddenly want me at their anniversary celebration? Something didn't feel right, but despite my misgivings, I found myself curious. What would it be like to see them again? To show them the successful woman I'd become without their support? Against my better judgment, I decided to go. I bought a new dress, an elegant navy blue sheath that cost more than my first month's rent in that tiny post-college apartment. I booked a hotel room in my hometown and took the day off work. The Grand Hotel was the fanciest place in my hometown, a restored Victorian mansion with sprawling gardens and a crystal chandelier in the ballroom. As I handed my keys to the valet and smoothed down my dress, I took a deep breath. This was it. I walked into the hotel lobby, my heels clicking on the marble floor. A sign directed guests to the Williams' 35th anniversary celebration in the Grand Ballroom. I followed the arrows, my heart pounding harder with each step. Outside the ballroom doors, I paused. Through the glass panels, I could see people mingling, laughing, raising champagne glasses. I spotted my mother in a silver dress, accepting congratulations from a group of women. My father stood nearby, looking distinguished in a dark suit. Tommy had said he'd meet me outside, but he wasn't here yet. I checked my watch, I was exactly on time. Taking another deep breath, I pushed open the doors and stepped into the ballroom alone. The ballroom fell silent as I entered. Several people turned to stare, whispering to each other. I recognized distant relatives and family friends, people I hadn't seen in over a decade. I spotted my brother across the room, standing near our parents. His eyes widened when he saw me, and he hurried over. "Jodi, you came," he said, giving me a quick hug. "I was about to text you." "I said I would come," I replied, scanning the room. Tommy led me through the crowd to our parents. My mother saw me approaching and whispered something to my father. His expression hardened. "Mom, Dad," Tommy said when we reached them, "look who's here." My mother forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Jodi, we weren't sure you'd come." "Yet you invited me," I said. An awkward silence fell between us, then my mother led me through the ballroom to the farthest table, tucked in a corner. She pointed to a chair with a name card on it. I looked down and froze. The card read "Failure" in elegant calligraphy. "Is this a joke?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. My mother's fake smile dropped. "You know exactly what you are," she said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Everyone here knows it too. Tommy has been supporting us for 2 years while you've been off living selfishly on your inheritance. You haven't sent us a single cent." Tommy appeared at my side, his face pale. "Don't make a scene," he begged me, "just sit down, we can talk about this later." I looked at the failure name card, then at my mother's satisfied smirk. A strange calm descended over me. I picked up the name card, nodded, and sat down at my assigned seat. I placed the failure card prominently in front of me where everyone could see it. The dinner began. I ate silently, ignored by the other guests at my table. Finally, the time came for toasts. My father spoke first, thanking everyone for coming. Various relatives followed with warm wishes. When the toast seemed to be winding down, I stood up, champagne glass in hand. The room fell silent again. My mother's face darkened, but she could hardly stop me from giving a toast without creating a scene. "I'd like to say a few words," I announced, "to my parents, on their 35th anniversary. I raised my glass. Many of you know me as the family disappointment, the failure." I gestured to my name card. "What you may not know is that for the past 2 years, I've been sending my brother $2,000 every month to support our parents." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother's face went white. "That's right," I continued, "that mortgage payment, me. Those medical bills, me. The money came from me, not Tommy, he was just the middleman." I turned to face my parents directly. I did it because despite everything, I thought it was the right thing to do. But I see now that nothing will ever be enough for you. So consider tonight my resignation from that responsibility." I set down my glass and picked up my purse. "Congratulations on 35 years of marriage, may you enjoy many more, without my financial support." I had just reached my car when I heard voices calling my name. My parents were hurrying across the parking lot toward me. "Jodi, wait," my father called, "we need to talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, unlocking my car. "You can't just cut us off," my mother said, her earlier hostility replaced by panic. "We need that money. You should have thought of that before you labeled me a failure in front of everyone we know." "We didn't mean it," my father said quickly, "it was just a joke that went too far." I laughed. "A joke? Like when you told me I wasn't worth college? Or when you kicked me out the day after graduation? Were those jokes too?" They had no answer for that. "For years, I tried to earn your approval," I said. "And still, the only thing you value me for is my money, which you didn't even know was mine until tonight." I got into my car. "Don't call me, don't text me, we're done." A week later, Tommy came to see me. "I just wanted to apologize," he said. "What they did was horrible, and I had no idea they were planning it." "I believe you," I replied, "but it's over now. I meant what I said, I'm not helping them anymore." Tommy nodded. I understand, I don't blame you. Life went on. I focused on my career, which continued to flourish. I took a vacation to Europe, something I'd always wanted to do. I started dating again. 6 months after the anniversary party, Tommy called me with news. They had to sell the house, he said. They'd been living in a small apartment for the past month. They're telling everyone it's your fault, that you're selfish and greedy. Sometimes I thought about my parents in their small apartment, living with the consequences of their choices. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, but no guilt either. Grandma Rose had been right all along. Children should be loved equally. My parents had failed to learn that lesson, and they'd lost both their children as a result, Tommy to his disillusionment, and me to their cruelty. I kept the failure name card as a reminder, not of my parents' opinion of me, but of the day I finally freed myself from needing their approval. I'd framed it and hung it in my home office, where I could see it every day as I built my successful life on my own terms.